Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
So red flags, through my life, there's been times when I've seen the red flags, but I've doubted myself. For instance, this one time, I felt like something might be going on, but I thought, oh, that person looks like my abuser, so I'm probably overreacting. I'm putting my stuff on.
You're projecting.
Yes. Only later to find out, yes, something was happening.
Yeah, and the red flags aren't always obvious. So sometimes we get this feeling and we feel like something's off, but we can't put our finger on what it is. And then because we tend to be hypervigilant,
right,
we think it's just us. Oh, no, I'm just being paranoid or overreacting.
It's that second guessing.
But there are red flags that aren't obvious to everyone, but they should be noted. And one of the things about it is it's better to err on the side of caution, to err on the conservative side than to just blow it off and think, because if you just blow it off and then you find out years later you were right, something was happening and it can wreck someone's life. Because you just thought, well, I'm just overreacting. But of course, it's not your responsibility to do something all the time. I mean, we can't change everyone's. It's not our responsibility to make sure no one ever gets hurt. We just can't do it. But it helps to pay attention to red flags, especially if you are a parent or, you have family members that are young. It's good to pay attention and know what red flags might be.
And it's important to do our part regardless. So there were some neighbor kids. Me and another neighbor were pretty sure their dad was abusing them. And because I had realized it was my responsibility to call CPS, I did. And when CPS came to the house, those kids blamed their mom. They made up stories about their mom. Because she was safe. And I remember thinking, did I do the right thing? And the thing is, if you see a red flag, you have to do the next right thing. And if that's calling CPS and it doesn't pan out the way you thought, you still have to do what's right in your heart.
Yeah, because it could eventually keep tracking it, and eventually it might turn out that they'll deal with it.
And as adults, if they look back, they have to know it was me that called.
Yeah.
And so when they get their truth, then they have to know somebody cared.
Yeah, it's important to know that at least someone was looking out. So what are red flags? Well, they're indications that something is going on that isn't normal, that isn't right. And
what physically have you experienced when you've seen a red flag?
Panic, actually. A sense of dread and panic, because I feel, oh my gosh, that's not supposed to happen. And then you kind of panic and then you wonder what to do.
Right.
And
I feel it physically, like goosebumps or in my stomach, sickness where I go, oh my gosh. And, in the past, I would find ways to normalize it or let go of it. But now if I feel that, I just have to pay attention, listen, and do whatever the next right thing is, which is most likely never easy.
Yeah, it's so hard to take the step of calling someone's attention to it, like calling CPS or talking to, if you know them, talking to, if it's like one parent acting really strangely, maybe talking to the other parent.
Right.
There's all these ways of addressing it, but none of them are easy. They're always always going to be that feeling of, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I should do? But it's really important to pay attention to red flags, because I know so many times people overlook them and overlook them and overlook them until finally someone gets hurt or ends up in the hospital, or it just keeps going on because no one paid attention.
I see a lot of single moms where things come up and it's so overwhelming and so hard that it's sort of easy to sweep it under the carpet because it's somebody that you want to be with or someone you have an attachment to. And it's like often when we see the red flag, we know when we speak up, we are going to pay a price. So the child won't.
Yeah. And that's often what happens, but it's still important to protect the kids. So what would you say is a red flag?
First of all, I think a red flag is when you see something that is clearly out of line, like a man that is very inappropriate with a younger woman. But then there's that level of red flag where you know something in your bones, you know something's not right, and so you want to dismiss it because you don't have proof.
Yeah. Often you see someone behaving inappropriately somehow, and sometimes it's something they're doing to groom the child.
Right.
So they're treating them a little more special, a little more, they show them a little more attention than they do anyone else, and that attention seems inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But also red flags are behavior of the children. And these are important for parents and other family members to recognize when a child suddenly has a change in behavior that's not really, you're not sure why they're suddenly becoming really introverted or really, their grades suddenly drop. They suddenly become disinterested in everything, or they lose interest in what they usually are really interested in. They're just sudden changes in behavior that aren't really explained by anything.
Right, and they clearly don't want to be with someone. So for me, my mom thought that I should go to the store with different people that we camped with. And I would say, I don't want to go, Mommy, I don't want to go. And she would be like, you need to go. And so an alert mom would recognize, hey, a kid doesn't want to go to the store.
Yeah.
Something up with that.
Yeah, I mean, something you would normally really be excited about doing, but with a certain person, you're not comfortable with doing it with them. If that child suddenly acts differently about someone and acts really uncomfortable or unreasonably different.
One thing that I've seen a lot of is babysitters, and they get a ride home with the dad, and things happen inappropriate, just enough to make you feel uncomfortable. So you're like, I don't know. And do you go back? Do you tell your parents? Do the parents say, oh, it's nothing? Or do they overreact? One of the things I spoke with a counselor, a school counselor teacher, she was talking about bullying. And she said, when a kid comes to you because they've been bullied, if you overreact and you're like, I'm going to kill them, that doesn't help either. So it's being able to recognize the red flag and go, something's wrong. And even if you can't get it out of the child, because as you and I know, as we've talked about, they may be being threatened, is that we trust that red flag. And like your wife said, even if it's wrong, it's better to err on the side of sharing, of getting help, than not.
Yeah, err on the side of conservative, because you may be wrong, and in which case, you know, the worst that'll happen is you're going to create friction with you and that person or so on. But at least those people know you're looking out for the kids.
Right.
And I think as adults, it is our responsibility to look out for kids. I mean, kids should never be in a situation where they're alone with another adult who isn't their family member. And if that's happening, there should be, you know, you should be wondering what is the reason that they're getting a ride home with one adult. If all of a sudden, like if a girl doesn't want to babysit a certain family again, is there a reason she's uncomfortable doing that?
That happened to me, and I don't think I could tell my parents. I ended up running home.
Yeah.
And it was quite a ways, maybe more than a mile. And I get home, I get in my house, I go to bed. Nobody notices that I'm traumatized. And then the family calls again. And of course, my mom's like, yeah, she'll babysit, because she has no idea. And how do I, by this point, I don't know how.
How to say, no, I'm not comfortable. So if your child is suddenly uncomfortable, even going to the doctor.
Right.
I mean, doctors spend time alone with children. And sometimes, that's, necessary for the work. But if something happened and that child is suddenly really uncomfortable with it, you have to pay attention to that. You have to wonder why.
Yeah. The whole Larry Nassar, which we have followed, the Olympic coach, they had a family friend, and so they would go to the Nassars, and while the parents were upstairs, Larry would come down, and he would throw a blanket over him and the oldest daughter, and he would molest her. And she finally told her dad, and he didn't believe her.
Yeah.
And then when he basically said, you're lying, you need to recant this. And so finally she did, because she didn't want to lose her family. And then when all this stuff came out, her dad ended up ending his life because he couldn't live with the fact that he didn't believe her.
It's devastating to find out that you could have done something and you didn't. And that's why it's so important.
Right. And to remember that abusers are unlikely. Like, we can look at someone on the street and get the heebie-jeebies and go, ooh, they're icky. But abusers can be very charming people in our community. They can be leaders. They can be pastors, youth pastors, worship leaders, doctors. And I think that we are entering into a generation where there is less and less tolerance.
Yeah.
And I always say, err on the side of believing. If it turns out, which is rare, but if it turns out that it's a lie, it is better to err on the side of believing the child, because you can get the child help, and if it turns out it's not what the accusation is, you can get to the bottom of it. But if you don't, that child is scarred for life.
Yeah, it could lead to damage.
Right.
In a lot of ways, I consider being a survivor a life sentence. It's something you live with, and there is hope, there is healing. It takes a lot of work.
It does.
And it still never really completely goes away. You just get to the point where you're living the life that you feel like you were meant to live. And you're happy and fulfilled, but it doesn't mean it's gone.
No.
It's never completely gone. So if you can spot the red flags and pay attention and do something about it before something serious happens, and in some cases you might spot a red flag, bring some attention to it, and nothing will ever have happened, but you might have prevented something.
Right.
By calling CPS, or by talking to the other parent, or by talking to the police even, depending, or to the, principal if it's a teacher. You might have actually prevented something that would have happened.
Right.
And in that case, then you might have saved a child the life sentence of being a survivor.
I'll never forget, we took my daughter with us to buy a new car, and it was one of those auction places. And so we went up on the porch, and they had all these, triangle flags hanging around. And the guy came out, he shook our hand, and he put both of his hands on my daughter's shoulders. And she gave him the biggest stink eye. And I remember thinking, this kid is going to be okay, because I was never allowed to do that. And I just remember that moment. I'll never forget, because she was just like, okay, I don't swear, but it was like, don't fuck with me.
Yeah.
And she was 3 or 4 at the time.
She's like, that's not right. And
right?
I'm not happy about this.
She knew. And I was so pleased, because I didn't know. And I know in my reality, had I done that, I would have been in so much trouble. Because you respect adults and you do what adults tell you to do. And I just remember being so proud of her and thinking she's going to be okay, because she's going to be able to stand up for herself.
And that's where I have some hope for this generation and future generations is, when we were growing up, children never questioned adults. You weren't allowed to. You always respected and never questioned, and anything, adult told you to do or
the adult was always right.
Yeah, and you always questioned the children. If they said that something was wrong, you're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're making this up. You're just trying to get attention. Mm-hmm. They never trusted the children. They always trusted the adults. And now we're in an age where we actually do allow the children to respond and say, and this isn't right, and I don't feel comfortable about this, and this didn't feel right, and we listen. At least it's starting to happen. I just hope we will continue to listen to the kids and that's why red flags are important. If we see the kids' behavior changing, we can speak to them and say, what's going on?
Right.
What are you, is something bothering you? And it takes a while. You have to be patient. You have to have patience because it's probably something they're not comfortable talking about and don't want to talk about.
Or they don't know.
Or they don't know how to talk about it. And if you bring it up, it's going to freak them out at first. Mm-hmm. But you have to give them the space so that they will feel comfortable eventually to talk about it.
That's such a good point, Kevin, because one of my sons was being bullied in school, and the teacher said, something's going on, I don't know what. So both of us were trying to get to the bottom of it, but we couldn't get anything out of him.
Yeah.
And what we finally discovered is the child that was bullying my son, his dad had been sent to prison for inappropriate behavior. His dad was a counselor and was inappropriate with clients. And my son, when we finally figured it out, he said, Mom, he's struggling. Why would I turn him in? Why would I say? And I thought it's so interesting that, that nature is to protect.
Yeah.
But had he told us, maybe we could have surrounded that boy with some love and attention, realizing that, look, he's struggling too.
Well, and it's hard for kids because they don't know how things work yet.
They just react.
Yeah,
they act out.
They're all in react phase. And so even with being bullied and so forth, they're embarrassed about being bullied. I know I was embarrassed when I was a kid and I was bullied, and I never wanted to tell anyone that I got beat up. I felt bad that I came home and I was beat up, and I didn't want to say what had happened because I was embarrassed. I was upset, and so I didn't. But that's especially true when it's an adult mistreating a child. The child is going to be really confused because, the adult's supposed to be taking care of them. They're supposed to be the one that they can look up to and trust. And when they can't trust them, then their whole worldview is changed and they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't know what they can do to make a difference and know what's going to change. They don't know how it's going to change.
And our brains always try to rationalize no matter how old we are. So we hear stories of people that think they saw aliens, but their brain tries to rationalize. Whether that's true or not, I don't have an opinion on that. Yeah. But children's brain, it's like they're an adult, they're supposed to be kind. What is going on? So, their brain is trying to figure out how to deal with this. We've always heard there's fight or flight.
Fight, flight.
But there's more.
Yeah.
There's fight, flight, freeze or fawn, which is fawn is what women do when they're going to be raped. When they can't get out of it, they cooperate, and then they get blamed. Why did you go along with it? Well, because I didn't want to die.
And so the signs of red flags, there's so many, but it's hard to list them because they can be different for every child. They can be different for every person who's spotting them. But mainly it's that feeling that something isn't right here. Yeah. When you see a child acting strangely around someone, when you see a child's behavior suddenly changing and you don't understand why, if you see, there's all these things. And nowadays, it's really hard because children are so tuned into social media, and the social media is affecting their mentality. They're on Instagram, and suddenly they're changing because they see someone else doing something on Instagram, and they want to be just like them, or they feel bad about themselves because they don't live up to this ideal they see on Instagram.
Or they're being bullied.
Or they're being bullied on Instagram or other media. And so even those things are important to pay attention to because that will affect them. I mean, it causes girls to have eating disorders. It causes guys to be bullied, and, you know, all these things affect them socially and mentally.
Yeah. And I think what's important is there's a bystander. The bystander does nothing, or they videotape the incidents, upload it online.
Yeah.
But then there's the upstander. And the upstander is the one who's brave enough to say something's wrong. And if you feel something's wrong as an adult, it's your job to speak it, whether it's to the parent, whether it's to a teacher. And if it's wrong, it's better that you speak it and be wrong.
Yeah, we actually had an incident recently where there was a boy, a kid. He was one of the adults he knew, who he knew from church and so forth, wanted to take him hunting alone with him, with the adult. And the parents were thinking that was pretty exciting because they trusted this adult, they knew him, and they thought he was paying attention to their kid, making their kid feel special. And we just saw, we both, my wife and I, were just like, holy cow, that's a red flag. Yeah, no, we don't like the sounds of that. We talked to them and we're like, yeah, doesn't sound like a good idea. And because of that, they were like, oh, yeah, we didn't even think of that. We're like, why does he want to take him alone? Why not, you know, with other people around? That just doesn't sound right. And so they decided not to let him do that. And who knows? I mean, maybe this guy was trying to, you know, really give him an amazing experience and help him to, like the whole Boy Scout thing. Let's go camping and hunting and all this. But it didn't sound right. And so we just went, no.
And
I
good
don't
for
like
you,
that.
because if they're going to do it, there should be more than an adult and a child.
Yeah, it's always a kind of a red flag when an adult wants to do something exclusively with another child that isn't their own.
Right.
That maybe they're not in a relationship, you know, they're not family or something. If it's family, then, but if it's not, then there's something wrong.
So I think the most important thing is, if you feel creepy, if you feel that red flag, rather than do nothing, like I did, I just thought, I'm overreacting. It's better to look a little crazy and say something.
Or even look into it a little. You know, maybe do a little, ask the kid, talk to the kid.
Yeah.
Talk to the parent, talk to someone and say, you know, this just doesn't seem right. Is there something going on?
Right.
I mean, maybe before you call CPS, or, I mean, certainly call CPS if you definitely see something wrong happening. If you see, you know, abuse happening, then it's your duty to call CPS.
And
it's really important.
Often they're threatened, so you may ask the questions and they'll be protective, because if they share, their mom's going to get killed, or their baby brother's going to get killed, or their dog's going to get killed. In my day, we didn't have the internet to go and say, has this happened before? Is this guy, who is this? Let's Google this person.
Yeah.
You know?
But you can kind of tell when a kid's being evasive or uneasy, and also you can also just monitor the situation. If you think something's going on and the kid's going, no, nothing's going on, but they act weird about it, then maybe it's worth monitoring, or maybe mentioning it to CPS or something.
So I end my radio show at night and I say this because of the podcast Crime Victim Analyst, and I say, be curious, ask questions, and always trust your instinct.
Yeah, and that's important. Especially as a survivor, we tend to be more vigilant, but we also tend to spot things that others wouldn't spot.
And then we discredit ourselves.
Yeah, because we think we're just overreacting.
Right.
But, I mean, we know what grooming looks like if we've experienced it. We know what it looks like when a child is acting weirdly because their parents treating them differently. And they're not being normal. We kind of recognize the signs a little better just because we know them. So it helps if we pay attention to that and maybe bring someone else's attention to that.
Which brings me to the point, Kevin, when we tell our story and we admit our truth, then we can let go. And when we see something and we feel something, we can trust that.
Yeah, because then we realize it's not just overreaction, or, we're not just being crazy.
Been there, done that. You recognize it.
Yeah.
For instance, my mom has multiple personalities. And when I worked at Esther's, I could point them out. And I'll never forget one time this volunteer who was very brilliant. She was, I think, probably a doctor. She was a school counselor. And this person was telling her about her friends. And she's like, well, you need to talk to those friends. And I'm texting her. I'm going, those are her other personalities. But because it's what I lived through, it's what I knew. So I recognized it. And I wasn't freaked out either. And something I know that a lot of people don't is when you're dealing with a multiple personality, you ask for the main character.
Oh.
You don't go along with, oh, you're Susie today. No, it's like whatever the real name is, you ask for that one. You say, I'm going to talk to Karen. Whatever. And so when you have experienced, you know what you know, and you have to trust that.
Yeah. So trust your gut. And if you see something that seems like a red flag, pay attention.
Right.
And
always err in the side of saying something.
Yeah. Find out what you can do. Talk to someone, CPS, if it really is a big red flag.
And like I said, I called CPS and they blamed the mom. But the thing is I did what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. And at that point, CPS recognized that there was an issue. So at least they were aware.
Right.
And maybe the kids weren't ready to talk about it, but at least CPS was aware. And so at least that's the first step.
Yeah.
So pay attention, find someone you could talk about it, and take that step, because you could be saving a kid.
Yeah, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. Would you rather be embarrassed or save a child's life?
Yeah.
And when we look at how hard it was to come forward, how hard it is to tell our story, if we can keep from happening for even one child, it's worth the embarrassment.
It is. It is.
It's like when you think you're having a heart attack and you call 911, they always say, we're glad you called, even if it's not a heart attack.
Yeah, you did the right thing.
That's right. They always say that. And it really gave me the confidence to say, I'd rather err on the side of being safe.
Yeah, because if it's possible to save just one child, it's worth it.
It is.
Even if it means you may get full of yourself sometimes.
Well, I often think, what if somebody would have recognized? I mean, I remember going to my youth leader. I don't know what I said, but she quoted to me Acts 16:31, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved, and thy house. And she said, your family will be saved. And my dad was an alcoholic and an abuser. She didn't know that, and it was so many years ago, but the truth was, I was trying to tell her something's not right, and she's telling me, pray, which I don't think hurt.
No, but she could have done more.
Exactly.
She could have.
Believe me.
So, and that's the important part, is we can do more. And trust your gut, trust your signals. If you see red flags, pay attention.
And what's that saying? I'd rather apologize later. And, I always thought of that as in radio, it's like, go ahead and do that crazy thing and apologize. But I also think of it in this context is, you know what? I come forward, turns out to be nothing, I'll apologize later.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than do
Ask
nothing.
for permission and then do it. No.
Right.
Do it and then apologize if you were wrong.
And there's a campaign. It came out a few years back, see something, say something. And it was like, if you see a backpack. But here's the thing. If you see something that's a red flag, then say something.
Yeah.
Because you may be the only person brave enough to say something.
And it might just take you, just one person, to save that kid or that woman or whoever. So it is our responsibility. And on that note, so that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, and especially for all those listening, for their courage to speak the truth, to know the truth, and to be willing to take the risk to save someone else, to rescue someone, and to say something's wrong. I just pray, Lord, that you would also save those kids, inspire someone to rescue someone that looks like they're in trouble, and if it's possible, just to find a way to give someone the courage to step in and say this is wrong. Lord, I just thank you that your heart is with the kids. You love the kids and you want to protect them, and I just pray that you would find ways to inspire others to protect them. In your name I pray.
And Father, I thank you for the kind of God you are, that you're a God of love. And Lord, we know things happen out of our control, and we know that ultimately you are the final say. You are the God of gods, and you are a good and loving God. And when I want to protect children, Lord, I have no filter. I just want them protected. But when I look back on my life, I would never have asked for the abuse that came.
Mm-hmm.
But I am so beyond that because of your healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it shaped me as a person. And we often hear that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And Lord, we never want to do the things that make us stronger. We'd like to just be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I thank you that all of these things that we suffer through can be the things that make us stronger and that help us uplift the very next person. And so with that, Lord, I pray for your blessing on these ministries that are helping the homeless, that are helping children. And Father, we are seeing such a disconnect of people getting bossy and they know what's best. And Father, I pray that this recovery community will start to recognize that the person in recovery, whether they're doing the work or not, they absolutely know what they know. And Father, I claim that for my own son, Lord, that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and give me the courage and strength to step up and to speak up when I need to. In your son's holy name.